Hi, I'm Shelley Ryan, Master Gardener and host of the Wisconsin Gardener. Welcome to our special look at gardening with kids. You know, gardening is enjoyable for all ages, but there's something wonderful about seeing it through the eyes of a child. On this program, we'll show you how to make gardening with children fun and safe. We'll also look at some special gardening projects just for kids, and we'll survey some of the wonderful gardening books available for kids and adults. But first, we travel to Green Bay, where Danielle Lardnois teaches us how to grow our very own playhouse. That's next on the Wisconsin Gardener.
Major funding for the production of the Wisconsin Gardener has been provided by Jung Seed and Nursery Company, with garden centers in Randolph, Stevens Point, Madison, and Sun Prairie. And Fiskars, a Wisconsin manufacturer of ergonomic cutting tools for the home and garden, distributed worldwide.
Hi, this is the Children's Garden and I'm Danielle. I'm going to show you around. This is the sunflower house, and when we come in here, we can read and play. Now, these sunflowers start with these seeds. They can grow to be you have to plant them about 8 inches apart. Now, this is my take. Each tag tells about the other person's different sunflower. In between each sunflower, we planted morning glories. The morning glories are climbing up the sunflowers, and when these blooms are going to be pretty flowers. When this grows, it's going to be much taller than me, and they'll have pretty flowers. Then we can come and play and read in here.
Here's another garden structure that's fun and easy to grow. Make a teepee out of long poles. Tie them together at the top. Then plant pole beans around them and at the bottom. Scarlet runner beans are a good choice because they have pretty red and white flowers. The beans will grow up and make a leafy green hideaway.
You're looking at the Children's Garden in Green Bay, Wisconsin. This is part of the summer program for the Green Bay Botanical Gardens. And I'm with the director of this program, Barbara Heike. Barbara, this program has been going on for 7 years, and it just looks marvelous. You've done a wonderful job here.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about some of the basics of gardening with children. What do parents need to know to do this successfully?
I think the most important thing is that each child have their own garden plot and have it be the size that the child can manage. Right here we have 4 by 5 foot garden plots.
Kid-sized gardens then?
Yes, and the children are between 5 and 8, so it's just right.
And you have 64 kids throughout the summer?
That's right.
And 16 at a time or 20 at a time then?
And they come for an hour and a half once a week.
Okay. And do they get to pick what they're planting in here?
Oh yes, and they also get to choose some of the things that they like. We make a list of the things the children like and the things that will grow well here. And so we have a variety of cut flowers, herbs, vegetables, edible flowers,
Wonderful.
And straw flowers.
Well, let's talk about some of the basics. I've been told that, children have small hands. We should only plant large seeds.
Oh, we plant little lettuce seeds, Shelley, and we also plant little radish seeds, and I can show you how we do that.
Please.
Well, we have a film canister that we use, and we pre-measure the seeds so that the children can have just what they can handle and what will plant a row. And Tori's going to help us do this.
Okay.
Okay, Tori, which hand do you write in at school? Okay, then I'm going to put your seeds in your non-dominant hand, and you can bend right down and plant them under the string in the little furrow that we already made.
So the string is there to help guide them.
Right.
And this looks like a great technique for the little seeds. Otherwise, they're so lost so easily.
That's right, and they can use their dominant hand to control them better. Exactly.
Well, let's look at some of the other chores in the garden that children would do. Thinning, for instance.
Yes.
Barbara, when I think of thinning in my own garden, I have problems with it. I hate to take out anything in the garden that I've already planted.
Right, so with the children.
So how do you deal with that with children then?
Well, I'll show you how to do that with Allison. Allison, let's work on our carrots today that need some thinning. I'm going to put my hands on either side of the carrots that I want to save, and you pull out all the ones in the middle. So take a big hunk. Now's your chance. All right. Any keepers there? Not quite. Let's get some more right here. Pull all those out. I can see a little baby root right there. That would be almost a keeper. Okay, one more, and then you can do the rest of the row yourself. There you go. How about back here? Can you do that part yourself now? You're going to leave some and take some.
Well, we'll let Allison continue thinning, and she definitely does a better job than I do. I'd like to learn more about the tools that children use in the garden. I see a lot of kid-sized tools out there, and they're really cute, but is that important for kids? What do we look for in tools?
It's more important that they have real tools, and they learn how to work with real tools. Here we use a regular adult-sized trowel and a little hand cultivator. It seems to be all they need to kind of rake up their garden. Jenna is raking up her garden with a hand cultivator.
And by real tools, then, you mean nothing plastic, nothing that looks like a toy.
Exactly.
And so they use their hands a lot. They use the hand cultivator trowels? Or?
The regular trowels, and they like to be right down in the dirt and in with their plants. So a long-handled tool would just be cumbersome for them.
And push them actually away from being where they want to be.
Exactly.
Well, with them being so up close into the dirt, what do you do as far as bug control, chemicals on your plants?
We only organic garden in the children's garden. We don't use any chemicals at all. The children are right in there all the time, so it's safest this way.
Okay, and is there any bottom line? What else? What are we missing? What's the most important thing today about children's gardening?
I think that the children have to have fun with it.
So if it's not fun, they're not going to do it.
Exactly.
I guess that's the same for adults too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Barbara.
What do you get when you take toy furniture and fill it up with pretty plants? A flower bed. A garden can be a magic place where elves and fairies live and sleep. You can create a flower bed for them by taking a toy bed and planting flowers in it.
A lot of us adults spend a lot of time and effort trying to keep bugs out of the garden, but that may not necessarily be what we want to do with kids. I'm with UW Extension entomologist Phil Pelleteri. Phil, you've got quite a gorgeous creature on your hand. I can see where kids would be fascinated with this. It's beautiful. What is it?
This is a tomato hornworm, Shelley, and we find this when we're lucky on our tomato plants. And it will grow up to be a hawk moth, which is a species of moth that reminds people of hummingbirds because
really?
the dusk it'll be feeding on your flowers, flies very fast. Very interesting creature.
Now, is this going to nuke my tomato plants?
Well, this caterpillar will eat 2 to 3 times its weight a day in food, but you know, when you only have one caterpillar on your tomatoes, it really isn't that significant. And I think it's an example of, you know, if kids can watch something like this, they get a better appreciation for really what's going on out there. And that, even if insects are feeding on your plants, it's not necessarily all bad.
Well, what about something like the aphid? So I always think I usually run out there and try to get rid of them.
Well, this is another one that's fun for the kids to watch. This is goldenrod, and the red aphid that's on there, you notice there might be as many as 100 individuals, but the plant really isn't suffering much. One of the things we'll observe, and we even see a little bit of it going on there, is some of these have parasites on them. They're starting to get to be some beneficial insects. And I think, again, if children observe this over the season, they'll get a better idea of what really goes on in nature.
Well, aphids attract some, like you said, beneficials. Are there other things happening in the garden that...
Well, you know, we got one going on here where there is quite a few ants crawling around on this goldenrod for the same reason, is they're milking the aphids.
So they're attracted to these?
Yeah, the aphids are giving off a sugary water substance we call honeydew, and the ants are exploiting that. In fact, they're also protecting the aphids at the same time. And depending on the species, they'll even take the aphids down their burrows during the winter and then bring them back on the spring.
So they're really acting like farmers then. They're taking the cows in for the wintertime.
Very much so.
Well, you said something else happens with goldenrod, so that's a good plant
to
have.
Another example of what insects can do and the kids can watch, this tumor-like growth is a gall. There was a fly that stung this earlier in the season, and inside this, if we were to cut it open, is a little maggot. Now, it looks really like a gross distortion of the plant. It's very serious, but to be honest, it's cosmetic. The plant will survive just fine. If one were to take this in during the winter, next spring, a pitcher wing fly will come on out.
Well, I get the feeling then that you're telling me I should not be afraid to attract some of these critters for the sake of kids being able to watch them.
Well, I think kids can have a wonderful time, and they like insects to begin with when they're younger, and they get a better appreciation for what insects are about. Doing things like putting boards out in the garden is a pretty good way of seeing what's crawling around at night. Many of the predaceous insects are foraging at night, and they'll hide under things like boards. And so if we put a board out in the garden and the next morning come and lift it up, you'll see all kinds of wondrous insects.
Are there any particular plants? Flowers, obviously. Goldenrod works well. Anything else I could plant to encourage the bugs?
Well, you know, any plant I can think of is cabbage, especially in the late summer. You know, the white butterflies, or what we call imported cabbage worm, will show up, and little green worms will be there, and there'll be other insects. In the flowering plant group, I think roses is probably my favorite, because I can come up with 100 different insects that will show up. So if kids have a rose bush just to watch and observe over the season, they'll see quite a bit of insect activity.
Do we have to worry about kids becoming afraid of bugs or being hurt by them?
Well, there are a few insects, if you handle them, you might get bit. And so I think really what we want the kids to do is sit and observe. You can get a half an inch away from a bumblebee when it's feeding on a flower, and it's not going to bother you. And so that's what we're really about, is to give an idea. And then once you become comfortable and know the insect a little bit better, you'll be able to sort through which ones you can handle, which ones you can't.
And you're saying most of these aren't going to devastate our garden?
Well, you know, in the scheme of things, probably 5% or less of the insects that are out there are pests. And so that other 95% really do deserve to be understood a little bit better, rather than going out and get the insecticide to kill them.
So for the sake of some of the kids, us adults might have to control some of our own phobias about insects then.
Well, it might teach us to appreciate them a little bit better too.
Okay, great. Thanks, Phil. So consider sacrificing a couple plants in your yard for the sake of the bugs.
Here's a garden project for rainy days. Get some clay pots, paintbrushes, and non-toxic paint. Decorate the pots with your favorite flowers and pictures. You can also use sponges and even stamps made from potatoes to create interesting patterns and designs.
Maybe you've heard the line from the song that says, "They paved paradise and put up a parking lot." Well, here in Kenosha, Wisconsin, they've done just the opposite. This used to be a parking lot. I'm with Kenosha County Extension horticulturist Tom Kalb. Tom, tell me a little bit about this wonderful project you've got going here.
Yeah, Shelley, it's my pleasure, and it is wonderful. This is our Kenosha Sprouts Youth Gardening Project. It started a few years ago when our museum educator, Nancy Matthews, she realized that all these kids were hanging out at the museum kind of getting in trouble. So she called me up and said, let's do something in a garden situation, and it just worked out beautifully. Kids love the garden. They like to play in the dirt, they like to water, and gardening is really an exciting thing. You plant seeds, one week, next week, wow, things are happening, things are popping up. Before you know it, the flowers are coming. Then the harvest comes, and then they're racing around harvesting the vegetables that they grew. So it's really a neat thing.
Where do you get the plants for this project?
We get the plants from a wide variety of sources. Our local nurseries and garden centers support us. We have some private donations. Also, seed companies provide a little bit for us. Even hardware stores help us with the tools. It's a community effort in the fullest sense.
Well, tell me about some of the plants that you've got going here.
Okay, we got all kinds of flowers and vegetables. You gotta have some flowers because we want this to look beautiful for the neighborhood. We want the whole neighborhood to be proud of it. But then we got kinds of vegetables, and different types of vegetables I've found have worked over the last few years. Things that ripen slowly are gonna be hard because they'll be taken from the garden before they ripe. Like, I've never seen a red ripe tomato this big in 3 years, ever. But you will see cherry tomatoes make it in time, or yellow pear tomatoes, they'll work. Something like cabbage, forget it. It takes too long for the head to develop. But broccoli, something that's keeping shooting up new things, that'll work. Beans, there are always new beans on the vine. There's always new cucumbers, zucchini, all that will work. Be sneaky, put in some root vegetables like beets and carrots. They'll be okay, and it all works.
And that's partially because you want to teach these kids too. It's not just to harvest. You want to have produce around for them to learn from.
That's right. We want this to be a learning experience, and the best way you learn about gardening is hands-on, right in the garden with your own hands, getting in there. So the key is, how do we want to bring that garden to the neighborhood. That's the first thing. We don't want to have to take a bus to a garden. We want it right there in their backyard. And then the second thing is we want those kids to want to run to the garden. So we have fun. We've got to have fun. That's the highest priority. And then once we get them in the garden, then the learning experiences begin. You know, then they start, but they don't even know they're learning, but we're putting in the seeds and the transplants. They're weeding, they're watering, they're harvesting. They're learning hands-on, and it just works. That's the way. Oh, that's a good shovel full there. There you go. Now you're talking. Look at that little bug we got there. Look at that centipede crawling all over the place.
100 legs.
and it doesn't do you any harm. It's just part of nature. It likes being in here where it's cool and moist. Cool, huh? And they're weeding, and of course kids hate weeding, so we always say we're only going to let you weed for about 5-10 minutes, so it's almost like a privilege. Ricky, how about over here?
Well, how do you get them motivated? How do you interact with them?
You know what, I tell you, the kids are on the street. They are looking for things to do. They really are. They just hang out in the streets. All you got to do is drive that old rusty pickup truck of mine down, and they want to come because I want to get to know them. They can sense that I care about them and that I'm excited to see them, and they're looking for attention. And sometimes they have some family difficulties too, and so they're always looking for some more interaction, and they're looking for things to do. That's what it's all about. No wonder they get in trouble when they just hang out in the streets and they have nothing to do, nothing productive to do. So they welcome something to do, and I'm there to help them. And so are the neighbors. We got some wonderful neighbors here helping us. The community center helps us. The parents help us too. We all work together on this. I don't want to make a big deal about this, but we've got some like rival youth gangs right here in the garden right now. And these kids are learning a little bit about each other, and we're breaking down those barriers.
So it's community in every sense, like you said.
In every sense, and that includes even in the harvesting sometimes, and that what we've noticed is not only the kids harvest, but some of the neighbors harvest too. We had once a homeless person come in here, and he harvested all the cucumbers, 2 big bags of cucumbers, and he dropped them right off to the food pantry. And
Wonderful.
The food pantry knew, hey, what's going on here? I know you don't have a garden. He goes, oh no, it's just from my garden down the street. And so it's kind of neat that he adopted our community garden as his garden.
Now you plant some permanent things in this garden too.
Yeah, we planted a tree this year. I don't know how long we had this land, but the kids wanted a fruit tree. It's the kids' garden. Right. Okay, got it? Oh. Be careful, it's starting to fall apart here. Do you see the roots?
Yeah. What would the stick of shovel here?
What are the roots? Remember we loosened the roots, right?
Yeah.
Do you guys want to loosen up? They suck up what now?
Water and vitamins.
Water and the nutrients, right. Okay, Brian, you gonna help? You're strong. Here. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, up! There you go. Okay, be careful. Now you guys know what to do next, right? So we get them involved in the whole process, including the designing, and they take ownership in the garden. And that's one of the keys to success is give the kids ownership of the garden. We've had experiences in 2 of the gardens where the first plants we put in, they're pulled out by the neighbor's kids, because they kind of feel threatened maybe about the new happening here. But we give them some ownership in the garden. We teach them, we get them involved, we give them a responsibility, and before you know it, they take a leadership role in the garden. They're out there watering, and these kids learn. They know 100 degrees, the plants are wilting, they know that they gotta water that garden, and some of these kids do it on their own. Or like if I'm dumb and I leave some hose out there in the field, the neighbor's kids now take the leadership role, they take the responsibility, they collect the hose and give it to me next week.
This is a wonderful project.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
I think this shows that gardening isn't just good for adults and it isn't just good for kids, it's good for the entire community.
Make a scarecrow for your garden. First make a cross out of wood. Hang some old clothing on it and stuff it with straw. You can make the head out of an old pillowcase. Then draw some eyes and a mouth on it. When you're done, stand the scarecrow up and pound it into the ground.
Now we have a girlfriend.
Your scarecrow will stand guard over your garden all summer long.
Gardening with kids can be a lot of fun, but where do you go when you're fresh out of ideas? Obviously, books are a wonderful resource. I'm with Jim Bennett. He's a parent, a master gardener, and he writes book reviews for several national gardening magazines. Jim, tell me about the collection we're looking at here.
Shelley, these are some of my favorite books that I read to my children when they were little to get them interested in gardening. I've got picture books here for very little kids, story books for older children who are reading, activity books for actually doing their own gardening.
Projects.
Finally, some books on botany and conservation.
Well, let's look at books for the beginning gardener.
One of my favorites is Planting a Rainbow by Lois Ehlert. It's very good for color and illustration. Little children really like a lot of color. This shows lots of plants that go in a garden.
So it's a picture book, but it still has plant names in it.
Right. All parents love to read alphabet books to their children. And this is the accidental zucchini. It goes through the alphabet.
With gardening-related images like fork fence here.
Right.
Okay.
When they get older, they can start reading The Tale of Peter Rabbit.
A classic for kids.
Babar in His Garden.
Which I remember as a kid.
One of my favorites is Pumpkin Light by David Ray. This book has great illustrations, but also a good plot. It's very good on suspense and mystery. Kids really love that. This is about pumpkins in the fall.
Well, and the one underneath that is another classic.
The Secret Garden by Frances Burnett is probably the most classic gardening book about a young girl who gets interested in gardening.
Now that's for a little older readers, right?
Right.
Okay, what about when I actually get out in the backyard and I'm looking for projects? How-to, step-by-step instructions.
I think one of the first ones that caught my eye was Mark Brown's Your First Garden Book, because Mark Brown's written a lot of books about a little boy named Arthur. And all parents read these Arthur books. They're hard to avoid anyway. And so this is Your First Garden Book, and the kids really like this a lot. Then I look for books that have a lot of good illustrations also about how to actually do it. This is one of the big picture books, My First Garden Book.
So it actually takes a step-by-step through some projects.
Right. It actually shows how to do it.
Okay, now you said that conservation or rainforest was also popular. This one is about the rainforest?
Yeah, they get a lot on the rainforest in school these days, and conservation and biodiversity. And so the tie-in between gardening and the rainforest are obviously the plants.
Now you said this one was one of your favorites. Is this another?
That's a great storybook about saving the rainforest. It's about why not to cut down the great kapok tree.
Wonderful.
Kids
so it's
really
a good story too, then. Okay, then what about these here? This one looks more like a dictionary almost, or an encyclopedia.
Yeah, when you're gardening, you're obviously gardening with lots of different kinds of plants. Bulbs, flowers, vegetables, trees, shrubs. And the children need to know something about what the different kinds of plants are. So the little bit of botany tie-in is helpful too.
Now this one caught my eye. What is this one about?
My daughter got interested in that right now because her allergies are acting up. Plants that make you sniffle and sneeze. And she's learning a lot about why she's getting her allergies now. And she's also learning about weeds.
And you can't avoid those if you're going to be a gardener.
Nope.
So when we're looking for books, we look for color, we look for good stories, we look for projects that are simple to understand, and then just books that we enjoy reading.
Right.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jim. You can get more information on children's gardening books from Public Gardens and from your local public library.
There are lots of things to play with in the garden. Leaves become hats, and flowers become necklaces. Ornamental onions can be microphones or magic wands.
Well, I hope we've given you some ideas on how to garden with children. Remember, though, gardening isn't just for kids, or maybe it's for kids of all ages. I remember the sense of wonder I felt the first time my father made me a hollyhock doll when I was a little girl. I still feel that sense of wonder when I watch a tiny seed grow into an enormous flower. I guess we all garden for the same reasons, no matter what our age. It's fun, it's rewarding, and it's still magical. Thanks for joining me for this special edition of the Wisconsin Gardener.
Major funding for the production of The Wisconsin Gardener has been provided by Jung Seed and Nursery Company with garden centers in Randolph, Stevens Point, Madison, and Sun Prairie, and Fiskars, a Wisconsin manufacturer of ergonomic cutting tools for the home and garden, distributed worldwide. For a free one-year subscription to the Wisconsin Gardener's quarterly newsletter, write to the Wisconsin Gardener Notebook, Wisconsin Public Television, 821 University Avenue, Madison, Wisconsin, 53706.